The city had forgotten Harvey G. Wall's name, but it still remembered to fear the silence he left behind. After 18 months of consolidating territories across the eastern seaboard, eliminating rivals in Chicago, enforcing loyalty in Miami, burying problems in places that didn't ask questions, he was finally returning to the one place he'd deliberately abandoned. Before we continue, thank you for spending your time with this story. If you're enjoying it so far, please watch till the end and subscribe. The Blackridge estate, perched on 30 acres outside the city limits, had remained untouched since he'd walked away from it 7 years ago. A fortress of stone and secrets that held ghosts he'd paid good money to forget. His consigliere had mentioned it twice in the past year, suggesting they sell it or burn it down for the insurance, but Harvey had shut down both conversations with a look that ended careers. Tonight, though, instinct pulled him there. Maybe it was the exhaustion of violence that had become routine. Maybe it was the echo of his mother's voice during their last conversation before she died, asking him what happened to the man he used to be. Or maybe at 36, the most feared man in 5 states was simply tired of being surrounded by people who only loved his power. The wrought iron gates swung open as his driver entered the security code, numbers Harvey's own hands had programmed a lifetime ago. The gravel driveway stretched through overgrown gardens where weeds had conquered the manicured perfection his mother once maintained. His headlights cut through the November fog, sweeping across the mansion's facade, and Harvey's entire body went rigid. Every window blazed with light. Not the cold glow of time security lights, but the warm, living illumination of a home being lived in. His jaw clenched. Betrayal. Setup. Someone had not only broken into his property but had made themselves comfortable in it. The house was supposed to be a tomb, protected by systems that would alert him to a mouse crossing the threshold. Yet there it stood, breathing and alive, smoke rising from the east chimney into the cold night sky. Harvey stepped out before the car fully stopped, his $1,000 shoes hitting the gravel with purpose. Rain had begun to fall, light but persistent, as he moved toward the entrance. His hand instinctively went to the weapon concealed beneath his coat. Years of survival had taught him that the unexpected was usually a prelude to violence. But beneath the anger, beneath the cold calculation of how he'd make whoever did this disappear, there was something else. A tremor of something he'd thought he'd killed long ago. Anticipation. The front door wasn't forced. It was simply unlocked, as if someone had been expecting him. He pushed it open slowly and reality shifted. The scent wrapped around him like a memory made physical. Garlic and rosemary, something simmering on a stove, and underneath it all, the faint trace of lavender soap. Not the smell of an enemy. The smell of a life. Harvey moved through the doorway like a predator entering claimed territory. His hand remained on the concealed weapon as his eyes swept the foyer. The marble floors gleamed. Fresh flowers sat in the crystal vase his mother had loved. Someone had polished the mahogany banister until it shone. This wasn't the work of squatters or thieves. This was someone living here. Someone who'd made this house a home. The sound of running water came from the kitchen, then a child's laugh, bright and careless. Harvey's blood turned to ice and fire simultaneously. Children. Whoever had invaded his property had brought children into it. The leather of his gloves creaked as his fists clenched. He moved down the hallway with lethal silence, years of violence having taught him how to become a ghost when necessary. The kitchen doorway framed a scene that didn't belong in his world. A small boy, maybe 5, sat at the table coloring with fierce concentration. A girl, slightly older, was setting out plates with the careful precision of someone trying to be helpful. And at the stove, her back to him, stood a woman in jeans and an oversized sweater, stirring something in a pot while humming softly. Domestic. Peaceful. Completely unaware of the danger that had just walked into the room. You have 30 seconds to explain why you're in my house before I make a phone call that ends this situation permanently. Harvey's voice cut through the warmth like a blade through silk. The woman's entire body went rigid. The wooden spoon clattered into the pot. She turned slowly, and Harvey watched the color drain from her face as recognition and terror collided in her eyes. She didn't run. Instead, she moved with desperate speed, positioning herself between him and the children. Her arms spread wide as if her body alone could shield them from what he represented. "Mama?" The little boy's voice trembled. The girl had gone statue still, her eyes enormous. The woman's hands were shaking, but her voice came out steady, controlled. "Kids, go upstairs. No. Don't come down until I call you." "But, Emma." Now. There was steel beneath the fear. The girl grabbed her brother's hand and pulled him toward the back staircase, both children casting terrified glances at Harvey as they fled. The silence that followed their departure was suffocating. Harvey studied the woman who dared to stand her ground in his kitchen. Late 20s, exhausted shadows under her eyes, wearing clothes that had seen better days. But it was her face that made him hesitate. Something about the curve of her jaw, the defiance bleeding through the terror in her eyes, the way she held herself despite knowing exactly who he was. "Start talking," Harvey said, his voice dropping to the lethal whisper that made grown men confess to crimes they hadn't committed. "And understand that the only reason you're still breathing is because I want answers before I decide what happens next." Alicia's mind raced through 1,000 explanations, each one more desperate than the last. She'd known this moment would come eventually, had prepared herself for it during countless sleepless nights. But standing here now, watching Harvey G. Walls study her with those cold, calculating eyes, every rehearsed word dissolved into ash. "I needed somewhere safe." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "The house was empty. I didn't think. You didn't think I'd come back." Harvey moved closer, each step deliberate. He circled her slowly, the way a shark circles before the kill. Breaking and entering. Trespassing. Theft of utilities. That's just the legal problems you have, and we both know I don't solve problems legally. Alicia forced herself to remain still, to not track his movement even as every instinct screamed at her to run. Showing fear to a predator only made the attack come faster. She'd learned that lesson long ago in a different life from a different version of the man currently deciding whether she lived or died. "How did you get past the security?" His voice came from behind her now, close enough that she could feel his presence like heat against her back. "I didn't break anything. The code was—" She stopped herself, but too late. Harvey's hand shot out, gripping her shoulder and spinning her to face him. Not violent, but absolutely controlled. His eyes bored into hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "The code was what? How could you possibly know the code to a house that's been sealed for 7 years?" This was it. The moment where truth and survival collided. Alicia met his gaze, saw the dangerous patience of a man who had tortured information out of people and would do it again without hesitation. But she also saw something else, buried deep beneath the criminal he'd become. A flicker of something almost human. "Your mother told me." The words came out before she could stop them. Harvey's entire body went rigid. His hand dropped from her shoulder as if she'd burned him. "My mother's been dead for 4 years. "I know." Alicia's voice softened despite the terror coursing through her veins. "I was there, Harvey. At the hospital. She gave me the code 3 days before she died." The silence that followed was more terrifying than his threats. Harvey's face had gone completely blank, that emotionless mask men like him wore when deciding between mercy and murder. Alicia watched his hand move toward his jacket, toward whatever weapon waited there, and knew with absolute certainty that her next words would determine whether her children woke up tomorrow with a mother or became orphans before dawn. "She told me that if I ever had nowhere else to go, that this house would be safe. That you'd abandoned it just like you'd abandoned everything else that mattered." Harvey's hand stopped. His jaw clenched so tight she could see the muscle jump beneath his skin. "Who?" he said, each word carved from ice. "Are you?" Before Alicia could answer, a crash echoed from upstairs, followed by a child's cry. Not pain but fear. Emma's voice carried down the stairwell, trying to soothe her brother. It's okay, I've got you." Alicia's entire body tensed, every maternal instinct screaming at her to run to them. But Harvey stood between her and the stairs, a wall of controlled violence she couldn't get past. "Please." The word escaped before pride could stop it. "Let me go to them. They're scared." Harvey's expression remained unreadable, but something shifted behind his eyes. He stepped aside. You have 2 minutes? Then we finished this conversation. Alicia ran. She found them in the small bedroom at the end of the hall, Emma holding her brother while he sobbed into her shoulder. The boy had knocked over a lamp in his panic. Glass littered the floor around them. Mama, is the bad man going to hurt us? The boy's voice broke her heart. No, baby. No one's going to hurt you. She pulled them both close, pressing kisses to their foreheads, whispering promises she prayed she could keep. Emma, stay here with Liam. Keep the door locked. I'll handle this. When Alicia descended the stairs, she found Harvey in the living room, standing before the fireplace where his mother's photograph still hung. He hadn't moved to follow her. Hadn't used the opportunity to search the house or call reinforcements. He simply stood there, staring at the portrait with an expression that looked almost like grief. Your mother talked about you every day. Alicia's voice was soft, testing the waters. Even at the end, when she could barely speak, she'd ask if I thought you'd ever come home. Harvey's shoulders tensed, but he didn't turn. And what did you tell her? That some people run so far from their past they forget how to find their way back. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken history. Then small footsteps on the stairs shattered it. Liam appeared in the doorway, his stuffed rabbit clutched to his chest, tears still wet on his cheeks. Liam, I told you to stay. I'm hungry, the boy whispered, looking between his mother and the dangerous stranger with innocent confusion. And the pot was still on. Mama, you said we should never leave the stove on. Something remarkable happened. Harvey's rigid posture softened, almost imperceptibly. He looked at the child, really looked at him, and for a moment the monster vanished, replaced by something that might have been human once. How old are you? Harvey's voice had lost its lethal edge. Liam held up 5 fingers, then lowered his thumb uncertainly. Almost 5. My birthday is in. He looked at his mother for help. 3 weeks, Alicia whispered. Harvey crouched down slowly, making himself less threatening. You like that rabbit? Liam nodded, hugging it tighter. His name is Captain. He protects me from bad dreams. Captain's doing a good job then. Harvey stood, his jaw working as if fighting some internal battle. He looked at Alicia and she saw the fracture in his armor. Turn off the stove. Feed your kids. We'll talk after. Harvey retreated to the study while Alicia fed the children, putting distance between himself and the domestic scene that disturbed him more than any violence ever had. He poured himself 3 fingers of whiskey from the decanter he'd left behind 7 years ago, the liquor still good, still burning the same way down his throat. The study remained exactly as his mother had kept it. Her books lined the shelves, her reading glasses still sat on the desk beside a dried flower pressed between the pages of a poetry collection. Harvey had paid a service to maintain the house structurally, but he'd ordered them never to touch this room. Some ghosts deserved their space. He moved to the window, watching the rain streak down the glass, and that's when he saw it. In the garden below, someone had cleared the weeds from his mother's rose beds. Fresh mulch surrounded the bushes, protecting them for winter. White roses, the kind his mother had loved. The kind she'd spent every Saturday morning tending while humming old songs in a language she'd learned from her own mother. His chest tightened. Alicia had done this. A stranger who'd broken into his house had cared for his dead mother's roses when he couldn't even bring himself to visit her grave. She taught me which ones needed more water. Alicia's voice came from the doorway. He hadn't heard her approach, too lost in memory. Your mother said white roses were stubborn. That they'd survive anything if you gave them attention when they needed it most. Harvey turned slowly. Alicia stood there holding 2 cups of coffee, her defiance tempered now by something that looked like understanding. She set 1 cup on the desk and kept the other, maintaining distance. You still make it the same way. The words escaped before he could stop them. Her hand froze on the cup. What? Harvey's mind raced backward, pulling fragments from the fog of years deliberately forgotten. The way she held the coffee, that slight tilt of her head when she was thinking, the melody she'd been humming in the kitchen. It had been his mother's favorite song. But it was something else, something in her eyes, the way she looked at him without flinching. The coffee. His voice had gone quiet, dangerous in a different way now. 2 sugars, no cream. You brought me coffee exactly like that once before, a lifetime ago. Alicia's face drained of color. Her fingers trembled against the ceramic. A hospital waiting room, Harvey continued, memories crashing through walls he'd built from blood and violence. Late at night. My mother was in surgery. Someone sat beside me and handed me coffee without saying a word. Just sat there until the doctor came out. Recognition blazed between them like lightning splitting the sky. Alicia Nelson. Her name fell from his lips like a prayer and a curse. The nursing student who volunteered nights in the cardiac ward. My God. You were just a kid. She set down the coffee before she dropped it. So were you. The past hung between them like smoke, thick and suffocating. Harvey's mind raced through fragments of memory he'd buried beneath years of calculated violence. Alicia at 22 with hope still bright in her eyes. Before he'd become the monster who terrified entire cities. You disappeared. His voice carried an edge of accusation. One day you were there and then nothing. My mother asked about you for months. Alicia's laugh was bitter and broken. I didn't disappear, Harvey. I ran. There's a difference. From what? She moved to the window, putting her back to him, as if the view of rain-soaked gardens could give her courage. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. From Marcus Vance. The name hit Harvey like a physical blow. Marcus Vance. A lone shark who'd operated in the Southern Territories until someone had put 3 bullets in his chest 2 years ago in a restaurant parking lot. A man known for collecting debts in blood when money ran dry. He was my ex-boyfriend. Alicia's hands gripped the windowsill until her knuckles went white. I was young and stupid and thought I could fix him. By the time I realized what he really was, I was already trapped. He owned my nursing school debt, my car payment, my apartment lease. Everything. And when I tried to leave, he made it clear that leaving wasn't an option. Harvey's jaw clenched. He knew men like Vance. Had dealt with them countless times in his rise through the criminal underworld. Predators who fed on the vulnerable. Your mother knew. Alicia turned to face him, tears streaming down her face now. She saw the bruises I tried to hide. The fear. She helped me disappear. Gave me money, a new identification, told me to run as far as I could and never look back. And you did. For 7 years I stayed gone. Changed my name twice, moved between 6 different cities, worked jobs that paid cash. I built a life, Harvey. Met someone good, someone safe. We had Emma. Her voice cracked. Then he died. Car accident. Sudden. And I was alone with a toddler and another baby on the way. Harvey watched emotions flicker across her face, pain and fear and desperate exhaustion. Marcus found me 6 months ago. The words came out flat, drained of emotion. I don't know how, but he did. Sent flowers to the diner where I worked. Left notes on my car. Called me by the name I'd buried. He wanted me back, said I owed him for running. For embarrassing him. The children. He doesn't know about them. If he finds out. Alicia's voice broke completely. Your mother told me about this house before she died. Made me promise that if I ever had no other choice I'd come here. She said you'd abandoned it, that it would be safe. So when Marcus showed up at my apartment 3 weeks ago, I grabbed my kids and disappeared again. This time for good. Harvey's mind calculated rapidly, connecting dots that formed a picture both clearer and more dangerous than he'd imagined. Marcus Vance is dead. Alicia's head snapped up, hope and terror colliding in her eyes. What? Someone killed him. 2 years ago. The color drained from Alicia's face. She gripped the edge of the desk to steady herself. That's impossible. I saw him. He called me. He knew things only Marcus would know. Harvey's mind shifted into the cold analytical mode that had kept him alive in a world where hesitation meant death. Someone was using a dead man's identity to hunt her. Someone with resources, information, and a reason to want Alicia terrified. But that mystery could wait. Right now, something else demanded his attention. He stepped closer, studying her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. The curve of her jaw. The way her hair fell across her shoulders. The small scar above her left eyebrow that he'd never noticed in the dim hospital corridors all those years ago. The night my mother survived that surgery, Harvey's voice had gone quiet, stripped of its usual menace. You stayed until morning. Sat with me in that waiting room for 6 hours. I didn't even know your name, but you stayed. Your mother was my patient. I was just doing my job. No. Harvey shook his head slowly. You brought me coffee. You brought me a blanket from somewhere. And when I finally broke down at 4 in the morning, when the fear became too much, you held my hand and told me that the strongest people you'd ever met were the ones brave enough to be afraid. Alicia's eyes glistened with unshed tears. I remember. I came back the next week to find you. To thank you properly. Harvey's jaw clenched as the memory surfaced, sharp and painful. But you'd already put in your notice. The head nurse said you'd left suddenly. No forwarding address. No explanation. Because Marcus showed up at the hospital that day. Caused a scene in the parking lot. Your mother saw everything. Alicia's voice cracked. She found me in the supply closet afterward, helped me clean up the blood, and told me I deserved better than to die slowly at the hands of a man who didn't know how to love anything but control. Harvey's world tilted on its axis. All these years he'd thought she'd simply moved on, found something better, forgotten the scared young man who'd needed her kindness. But she'd been running, surviving, fighting to stay alive. You were the last good thing I knew before I became this. Harvey gestured at himself, at the expensive suit that cost more than most people earned in a year, at the monster wearing human skin. After you vanished, after my mother recovered and I realized you were gone, something in me just closed. I stopped believing people could be kind without wanting something in return. Harvey. I built an empire on that belief. His voice turned harsh with self-loathing. Convinced myself that kindness was weakness. That caring about anyone was a liability. And all this time, you were out there running from a nightmare while I became someone else's nightmare. Alicia reached out, her hand hovering near his face but not quite touching. You're not him. Not completely. I see it. In the way you looked at my son. In the way you let me go to my children when every instinct probably told you to use them as leverage. You don't know what I've done. No, she whispered. But I know what you didn't do tonight. And maybe that's enough to start. Harvey's phone shattered the moment with its sharp vibration. He glanced at the screen and felt his chest tighten. Vincent Corso. His underboss. The man who'd helped him build his empire on blood and precision. The man who never called unless something demanded immediate attention. I need to take this. Harvey stepped into the hallway, but kept Alicia in his peripheral vision. Old habits. Trust no one completely. We have a problem. Vincent's voice cut through the line like a razor. Your driver reported your location. You're at the Blackridge estate. Harvey's jaw clenched. Of course his driver had reported it. Loyalty in his world meant information flowed upward always. And Dominic Corelli knows. He's asking questions about why you're visiting a property that's supposed to be abandoned. Questions about who's living there. Boss, you know how this looks. Harvey closed his eyes. Dominic Corelli. The old guard. A relic from his father's generation who'd never fully accepted Harvey's leadership. A man who circled like a vulture, waiting for any sign of weakness to challenge his authority. How much does he know? Enough to be dangerous. His people have been watching the house. They know about the woman and the kids. Vincent's pause was heavy with implication. They're saying you've gone soft. That you're harboring civilians in a secured location without clearing it through the council. They're calling it a liability. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. In Harvey's world, liabilities were eliminated. Quickly. Quietly. Permanently. The council convenes in 3 days, Vincent continued. Dominic's already gathering votes. He's going to force you to choose Harvey. The organization or whatever this is. Harvey's free hand curled into a fist. The rules were absolute. No personal attachments. No unauthorized civilians in secured properties. No weakness that could be exploited by rivals or law enforcement. He'd enforced these rules himself countless times without mercy. There's more. Vincent's voice dropped. Whoever's been stalking your woman? They're connected. Professional. This isn't some dead boyfriend's ghost. This is organized. Someone with resources is using her to get to you, and Dominic knows it. He's saying you've compromised operational security by not eliminating the threat immediately. Harvey's blood turned to ice. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. The flowers, the calls, the stalking. Someone had been watching Alicia, waiting for her to lead them somewhere valuable. And she'd led them straight to his most private sanctuary. They're calling it a test, boss. They want to see if you'll do what needs to be done. If you'll prove the organization comes first. Vincent's voice held something that might have been sympathy. You know what they expect. What our rules demand. Harvey looked through the doorway at Alicia, who sat now on the couch, exhausted and vulnerable. Upstairs, 2 innocent children slept, trusting their mother to keep them safe. Boss? What are your orders? The silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of impossible choices. In his world there was only one answer. Only one way to maintain power and survive. Remove the liability. Eliminate the threat. Prove loyalty to the organization above all else. But when Harvey spoke, his voice carried a quiet certainty that surprised even himself. Tell Dominic I'll see him at the council meeting. And Vincent? Increase security around the estate. No one gets within a mile of this property without my knowing about it. Boss, that's not. Those are my orders. Harvey ended the call. Harvey stood in the hallway for a long moment, staring at his phone as the weight of his decision settled over him like a shroud. He'd just committed professional suicide. In his world, defiance meant war. Protection meant weakness. And weakness meant death. He returned to the study where Alicia waited, her eyes searching his face for answers she probably didn't want to hear. That was your people. It wasn't a question. She'd lived in fear long enough to recognize the change in atmosphere when danger closed in. Yes. Harvey poured himself another whiskey, this time offering her the glass. She shook her head. My organization knows you're here. They're calling you a liability. They want you gone. Alicia stood slowly, her composure fracturing. Then we'll leave. Tonight. Right now. I'll take the kids and... You'll do nothing. Harvey's voice carried the authority of a man who'd commanded empires. Sit down, Alicia. Harvey, I won't let you throw away everything because of us. We're not your responsibility. That's where you're wrong. He moved closer, his presence filling the space between them. You became my responsibility the moment my mother asked you to trust this house would be safe. The moment I chose not to pull that trigger tonight. The moment I remembered what it felt like to be human. Tears streamed down Alicia's face. They'll kill you for protecting us. They'll try. Harvey's smile was cold and dangerous, the predator showing his teeth. But I've built my reputation on being unkillable. Let's see if they're brave enough to test that theory. He pulled out his phone again, this time making a series of rapid calls. Alicia watched as Harvey transformed before her eyes, no longer the conflicted man wrestling with his conscience, but the Mafia boss who dominated the eastern seaboard through calculated ruthlessness. Marcus, I need 4 of your best men at the Blackridge estate by dawn. Armed. Experienced. No questions. Boss. Thomas, pull surveillance footage from every camera within 5 miles of my location for the past month. Someone's been watching this property. Another call. Elena, I need complete background workups on anyone who's made inquiries about Marcus Vance in the past year. Start with his known associates. When he finished, Harvey found Alicia staring at him with an expression caught between gratitude and fear. This is who you are now, she whispered. This is what you became. Yes. Harvey didn't flinch from the truth. I built an empire on violence and fear. I've done things that would make you run from this house screaming. I'm not a good man, Alicia. I stopped being one a long time ago. Then why? Because somewhere in this darkness, there's still a part of me that remembers sitting in that hospital waiting room, terrified and alone, until someone showed me that kindness still existed. Harvey's voice softened, the monster retreating just enough to let the man speak. You saved something in me that night. Something I thought I'd buried forever. And now it's my turn. Harvey, this will destroy you. Perhaps. He moved to the window, watching as headlights appeared in the distance, his security already responding to his calls. but I've spent 7 years destroying others. Maybe it's time I chose something worth being destroyed for. Alicia crossed the room and did something that surprised them both. She took his hand the same way she'd done in that hospital waiting room a lifetime ago. Then we face it together. Harvey squeezed her hand, feeling the warmth of human connection he'd convinced himself he no longer needed. Together. Dawn broke over the Blackridge estate, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold. Harvey stood on the terrace watching the sunrise, a sight he hadn't witnessed in years. Men who lived in his world rarely saw mornings. They operated in darkness, where violence and secrets thrived. But this morning felt different. No. Like something ending and beginning simultaneously. Behind him, the house had transformed overnight. His security team had swept every room, installed additional cameras, reinforced entry points. The fortress his mother had built for family had become a fortress for protection. The irony wasn't lost on him. Inside, Alicia moved through the kitchen preparing breakfast while Emma helped and Liam chattered endlessly about Captain the Rabbit's latest adventures. The domestic scene should have felt foreign, threatening even. Instead, it felt like something Harvey hadn't experienced in so long he'd forgotten the word for it. The council meeting is in 2 hours. Vincent appeared beside him, his expression grim. Dominic's got 7 votes confirmed. You'll need 9 to maintain leadership. I know the math, Vincent. Then you know what you need to do. Walk in there, explain this was a tactical decision, promise to eliminate the situation and you keep your position. Vincent's voice dropped. Or you can throw it all away for a woman and 2 kids you barely know. Harvey turned to face his underboss, the man who'd stood beside him through countless wars. I know exactly what I'm doing. Do you? Because from where I stand, you're committing professional suicide for a ghost from your past. Maybe. Harvey's jaw set with determination. Or maybe I'm finally choosing to be the man my mother raised instead of the monster circumstance created. Vincent studied him for a long moment, then did something unexpected. He smiled. About damn time, boss. I was wondering when you'd remember you had a soul. You're not going to try to talk me out of this? Why would I? I've watched you build an empire and lose yourself in the process. If it takes a nursing student and her kids to remind you who you are, then maybe this is exactly what needed to happen. Vincent clapped him on the shoulder. Besides, I've already made some calls. You've got more support than you think. The council meeting came and went like a storm. Dominic made his case, demanding Harvey prove his loyalty by eliminating the liability. Harvey stood before the assembled bosses and made a different choice. He told them the truth. About his mother's promise. About the woman who'd shown him kindness when he'd forgotten what it looked like. About the children who'd reminded him that innocence still existed in a world he'd painted black. And then he gave them an ultimatum. I will protect them. If that costs me this position, so be it. But I will not become so consumed by this life that I forget why we built these organizations in the first place. To protect our families. Our legacy. The vote was closer than Vincent predicted. 9-8. Harvey retained his position by a single vote. 3 months later, Harvey sat at the same kitchen table where Liam had once colored, now reviewing legitimate business contracts. Alicia had returned to nursing school, this time without debt or fear hanging over her. Emma thrived in a private academy. Liam's nightmares had stopped. The house on Blackridge Lane was no longer a tomb of memories. It was alive again, filled with laughter and second chances. Harvey G. Wall was still a dangerous man. Still commanded respect and fear. But now he also knew what he was fighting for. Not territory or power or legacy. He was fighting for the future. For the family he'd found in the ruins of his past. For the man he'd almost forgotten he could be. And for the first time in 7 years, Harvey believed in redemption. Thank you for reading. If you enjoyed this story, kindly like, subscribe and share for more stories like this.